How's it going, everybody? My name is Richard, and today I'm going to be teaching you about the Synoptic Gospels, specifically what they are, who's a part of them, and also why some chapters are not included in the Synoptic Gospels. We'll be talking about a little bit of who is Q, and the importance of Q, and talking about why John is not part of the Synoptic Gospels. So, what is the Synoptic Gospels? Well, the Synoptic Gospels is 3 documents that are very important, very historically accurate documents. The first one is Matthew, the second one is Mark, and the third one is Luke. And these 3 Synoptic Gospels have very similar stories, have very similar geographic locations, and are very matching in a lot of ways. The Synoptic Gospels are called the Synoptic Gospels because synoptic meaning all are seen together, as in these all go together as far as the story of Jesus. And unlike other chapters in the Bible, these have a lot in common. To say it simply, 90% of Mark's material is found in Matthew and Luke, and that's where the synoptic problem comes into play. What is the synoptic problem? The synoptic problem says it is impossible for 3 documents like that to be so accurate without some kind of mischievous stuff happening, aka some human interference. And that would lead Matthew and Luke to be uncredible because they are essentially getting their information from Mark. Well, that is where Markan priority comes into play. And the idea is that Mark was the first to write the Gospels, then Matthew, then Luke, in that order. The big thing with Mark being the first is that it shows authenticity to the story of Jesus. And it begs the question of, well, if Mark is the only one to have this authenticity, then what are we cross-referencing it with? Why are we distrusting Mark's story fully and not taking a look at the other apostles? Well, that's the idea, or the idea of Q comes into play. Q is essentially supposedly a second source document used by both Matthew and Luke in order to write their Gospels. So think of it kind of like Mark and Q are the 2 source documents, and then Matthew and Luke are the ones cross-referencing and borrowing information from theirs in order to write their Gospels. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because if we can find out who Q is, or the document of Q, it would push back the scripture, and it would push back the words of God, or it pushed back the words of Jesus and his deeds back even further, making it closer to the actual event time, lessening the time for myth to get into play, and adding to the validity and accuracy of the accounts. And what does that mean? That means that if we were able to find that document, we would pretty much be able to prove that the church was not involved in any of it, that this isn't just some elaborate story that somebody made up. There are people out there who believe the church is the one in charge of creating these, the Bible, creating the Synoptic Gospels, in order for people to, essentially for a multi-century business scheme. And if we were to find Q, this would tend and it would essentially eliminate that possibility. There's a lot of things that would eliminate this possibility that we obviously know it's not made by the church because of how accurate it is, how much time it would take for them to go out and recruit a bunch of people and make it worth their while to lie and all this stuff. It just doesn't make sense. But when it comes to the credibility of the Synoptic Gospels, it's very important that we see it as very much similar, and we see that those dates and overall the vision of Jesus' story aligns. Unlike the Gospel of John together, or goes with the story of Jesus. One of the biggest things is, or one example of this is the controversial cleansing of the temple, where John records it happening early in the ministry in chapter 2, and opposed to it happening late, or in the last week of Jesus' life, which is told in the Synoptics. Another one is John's Gospel does not recount the baptism of Jesus, but describes the start of the Lord's ministry as or from the call of his disciples in chapter 1 through 35, or chapter 1 35 through 51, and the turning of water into wine in Cana of Galilee, and that's in chapter 2 1 through 12. And those are just a few things that are just not the same, that he kind of sees it as different, and the synoptic gospels see it as the same.